Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. We have our next victim. This is going to be a early 90s John Deere STX38. The yellow deck version. The yellow decks were the first ones. After that they changed to black decks. The black deck was a little thinner. Generally speaking, the yellow deck is considered to be a slightly superior tractor. This, I just picked it up. Obviously we've got a really high lift on that side of the deck and really low on this side of the deck. Looks like one of the lift brackets may need adjusting or something. I don't know. It fires up, it runs. Actually, let's do it. I'll show you what's going on. We'll have to figure it out. Oh, come on now, just had you running. Okay, so that's idle. That is not fast enough. If I back it up some, it should speed up. I think we have a governor or linkage issue. It's got a Kohler 12.5 horse in it. Looks like overhead valves. We'll be sure to check those out. We're going to check the crank key, make sure it's not broken. We're going to pull the carb off, take it apart, clean it out. And we'll see what we can do with it. It's a decent tractor. Looks okay. Not sure if I'm going to repaint this one, but like I did on the 130. But we'll see how it goes. Alright, I'm going to get some stuff organized and get you guys set up in the stand, and we'll jump in. I found the issue with our lift brackets. The rear of the deck is shifted to the left. So this part here is actually supposed to be on the back side of this bracket and sits on almost like a roller. So something happened and this deck is nowhere near where it's supposed to be. You can see, let's get a light over there. Maybe, there we go. That yellow piece here is supposed to be sitting down on top of that roller. So what's happened is this side is lifting way too high. It's nowhere near where it should be. So I'm going to take this arm, I'm going to pull that pin out. I'm going to relax this arm, let the deck move down so I can get everything back aligned where it needs to go. And we'll see how it goes from there. There we go. Back in its home. Working now. So let's see how it looks up from the top now. Wish this camera had a wider lens, wider angle. Anyways, push this down to release. This is the bar that controls the up and down movement of the deck. So flat down, flat down, and straight up. It's actually spring loaded up. Makes it easier. Nice. Well, that's a easy fix. Now, a bunch of other fixes. I've already noticed that belt is nowhere near where it should be. It's upside down in the pulley. Okay. And it's worn all weird. I've already checked the spindles on this deck. They're okay. The blades do engage and disengage. Just check the blade belt here. Blade belt is worn kind of funny on one side. We'll get that figured out. All in all, this tractor's in nice shape. It's showing its age. Paint's a little dull and faded, but it's going to be alright, I think. Okay, let's try and get that hood off. Last John Deere I worked on didn't seem to be too easy. Most of the time you just disconnect a light wiring harness if it has one, and just you open the hood to that position and give it a pull. It comes right off. Now this one's all bolted on, so, and spring loaded. Okay, let's get the hood off, go from there. So I've got the hood off. That wasn't too hard. Actually, there was a couple of springs that ran from the, there's a hinge, there's a pivot rod that goes through here, and there was just a couple of springs, one on each side, that went from that rod, and they just hooked on here. So I just grabbed a screwdriver, release the springs, and then the pivot rod just slides out. So the hood's off easy. I got the air cleaner assembly off with the filter and the base and all that stuff. I did run these nuts down here because there's a long shoulder on the stud, and I need to tighten the carburetor against the engine to see why it's doing what it's doing. It won't rev up, it's crazy. So I'm looking down inside there, so we can get a light somewhat in there. So I can see the throttle plate moving, but it's a hit. Now it's wide open. It's hit and miss. So I'm going to show you something interesting here that I found. Just grab my screwdriver there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the throttle plate. I'm going to hold that, mechanically hold it closed, so it's at idle. So this is what I found. The plate is closed. This is the throttle arm. Let's try and get it so you can see. There, I'll move it with this. Can you see that top piece is moving and the throttle plate is not? So the shaft that runs into the carburetor that turns that plate open and closed, that shaft is not tight to that little arm. So that's a problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the carb off. I'm going to clean it anyways, and I'm going to use a small ball peen hammer, and I'm going to peen that back over and put a little blob of JB Weld on it to make sure it stays put. So yeah, that was the problem. Yeah, you can see the shaft is not turning, but this lever is. Well, that'll certainly cause a problem. I did check in here. This is called a self-relieving choke. So when you put the throttle lever all the way to the choke position, it does close. When you pull it off a choke, there's a little spring underneath here, and once the engine starts to pull vacuum, this automatically opens and it's self-relieving, so it doesn't mechanically open the choke plate. Anyway, so that's yeah, well, that was weird. I'm moving the throttle up and down and it's inconsistent. It's not always opening. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it runs faster. Sometimes it doesn't. So that's an issue. Guys, if you're having an issue with these, this is, I believe that's a Walbro carburetor on this. It's either a Walbro or a Nicky. It's got an idle mixture and an idle speed. So this should be a Walbro. I believe the Nicky only has one adjustment. But anyways, that's that. We're going to get up into here because it's hard to see. There's no light in there. I turned this around to see what kind of a gap we had on the coil. Oh, there's the magnets. Let's get it turned around there. Still got the plug in, so it's hard for me to... Trying to get light and camera at the same time. It's hard. Well, there we go. A little better. There's a massive gap there between the coil and the magnet. Way too big. See if we can get... That's a big gap. It's huge. It's probably about 3 times the size it should be. I don't know what's going on in there, but we're going to pull this cover off anyways. I want to check for rodentia, and I want to check to make sure that everything looks good underneath there. I'm going to set the coil gap and carry on. Old machines have definitely had screwdrivers and wrenches on them at some point, so sometimes you have to unfix problems that somebody has caused inadvertently, and then we will keep going. Okay, I'm going to we'll pull the carb off, get it on the bench, I'll pull the cover off, and I'll get underneath there and get the camera turned back on so you can see what I find. Alright guys, so I got the carb off and torn down in the interest of time and abbreviating my some of the minutes out of my videos. And show you the tear down. It's very, very basic on this one. Everything is fixed. So I've got the idle mixture screw out. It's rusty and crappy. That's going in the ultrasonic cleaner. This is the needle. It's an all metal needle. Got a rubber seat in the carb. That can go in the ultrasonic. This is a dirty screw. It's an external screw. It's not going to go in there. I don't want to unnecessarily contaminate my cleaning solution. This gasket is still decent, still pliable. I'll just give that a wipe, clean it out. Plastic float, doesn't have any gas in it. The pin, it can go in for a bath too. This is what I found in the float bowl. Yeah, that's no good. It's on the ground now. I'll give that a wipe with a rag and then I'll pop it into the ultrasonic cleaner. This is our fuel shutoff valve, anti-backfire valve. That could be named a few different things. It does work, so, but it does need to go in the cleaner. That's that. Here's again that shot. So this is the throttle plate. That's the choke side. This is the throttle plate. This is what controls your engine speed. So I can hold that plate and move the linkage. Move that linkage back and forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this. It does have an idle speed screw, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it on the high speed stop. I'll hold this lever up here. I'll center the plate where I want it, and then I'll stake it down. I'll whack it with the center punch and a hammer carefully because everything in here is brass and aluminum. But I want to bend the top of this metal back over where it's supposed to be. But I'll do it after it comes out of the ultrasonic cleaner. That way it's clean. Okay, let's close this up. Carburetor parts in the bath. Come on, behave yourself. There we go, that's that. Carburetor and the bowl. Let's go. Been warming up for a little bit. Sink the bowl. Whoop. Abandoned ship. Got a little tea bagger in there. Carburetor. Oh, I shouldn't say that. It might be a trademarked Terrell fixes all saying. Yeah, I'm not going to mess with that tube. It's coming out in the cleaner, so. Just enough. Just enough. Okay, I'm gonna actually top that fluid up just a little bit, get it up to the max line, and I'm not even gonna turn it on camera. It's a little bit annoying in real life, but as soon as you put it on with a camera on, it's like crazy loud. It actually, for some reason, cameras amplify the sound of ultrasonic cleaners. So once it's clean and dry and on the bench, I'll turn the guys back on and we'll put it back together. Okay, so what I've done is I've got the top end of the engine off. I took the bolt out, took the whole cup assembly out with the screen on it, and I'm checking down in that slot to see if I can tell if that key is sheared. Looks to be intact. I don't see any cracks, I don't see any galling on it, so that'll be fine. That bolt was not very tight, so I'll make sure it's tightened up. So this is the kill wire for the coil. This is the ground. So when you shut it off, when you shut the key off, this becomes a ground, kills the coil. I had the coil off. I cleaned the tops of the stands where the coil sits. I cleaned the laminate here on the coil, so it's got a good ground to the engine. So now it's just a matter of setting the gap. So the gap is massive. So we're going to stick a business card in there. We're going to loosen these two bolts, and we're going to let the magnet pull itself on to set its own gap. So So I'm going to put a standard business card. Oh, look at that. Standard business card in there. That'll give us our gap. We can loosen these screws. I'm going to actually see the coil jump forward. There we go. Forward it is. You don't need to push it, just let it go under its own power, and that'll be close enough. Snug these down, not crazy tight. They're tiny little screws going into aluminum. You break them off, you're going to have a bad day. There's that. Here we are. Gap is set. Let's have a look. Much, much better. That's the way it should be. Okay, I'm going to pull the spark plug out, check that. The engine is warm, I was running it, I can't set the valves. And it's like the Kohler, some of these 12.5s had manual adjustable valves, some of them had hydraulic valves, or manually adjusted rockers. Some of them have hydraulic lifters, so you don't need adjustment. But I'm going to pull the cover off, have a look. Carburetor is still soaking, so we'll let that continue on with that. And I figured I'd get this done while the carburetor was in its bath. I think because somebody else has been wrenching on it, I think I'm still going to do a basic setting on the governor. We'll see how it runs when I get it back together. But yeah. Okay, back shortly. Okay, so what I did was I held the throttle plate in wide open position, straight. I held this against the open stop, and then I started with the hammer and I went around and around that piece of brass and I bent it over slightly. Got to the point where it was pretty well stuck where it needed to go. Then I grabbed myself a pin punch and I went around and around like this, mushrooming the top of that brass over. So now the throttle plate does not, the throttle shaft does not move independently of that. So I may have moved the relationship, changed the relationship between the throttle plate and this arm. So what I did was I'll back the idle screw out, just so I know it doesn't go screaming. Well, it won't anyways, but back it out a little bit. If I can't get the thing, like this is now not touching the idle screw. If I can't get it to idle down far enough, that means the relationship here has definitely changed. But I think I will. If I can't, doesn't matter. I'll do a small adjustment on this. I'll bend this part in or out to get this to behave properly. And then after that's done, I can use that screw here to make sure it works okay. Anyways, that's that. Carb's out of the cleaner. I took most of the paint off, and I took all the junk off. Let's get you in the stand. We'll throw this thing back together real quick. All of our parts of out of the ultrasonic. Carb looks nice and clean. I've already put the seat back in there. I didn't show me taking it out or putting it in. But anyways, it's a rubber seat in there. So I just cut my hand over here and put compressed air into the fuel inlet, and then it pops that seat out into my hand. Anyways, it's back in. It's in the proper way. There's a right way and a wrong way. The smooth side should be visible when it's installed in the carb, and there's a rib around the side that's mounted into the carb. O-rings back on. Oh, you know what? That float is no good. It wasn't making noise, but look at that. There's a hole in it. I didn't put this in the ultrasonic. It wasn't making noise before. I guess that little piece, I looked at it like this on the bench and I couldn't hear anything rattle, but well, crap. Now I gotta find a float. It's a Walbro carburetor. So is this one. It's just some random carb. Maybe. Maybe. I doubt it. My luck doesn't work like that. There's no needle in this carb either. Well, that might have been a problem. Doesn't hurt to try. Let's see. Nope, doesn't even fit in here. Well, poo. Now I gotta go hunt for parts. So I ordered the new float from the John Deere dealer, local to me here. Also ordered a drive belt for the deck at the same time, because that one's a mess. The other belts are good. One belt is bad, so I'll get that changed out. So I, instead of waiting forever, I went out into the pile of stuff outside and I found a donor. So the carburetor off of this is is a completely different carburetor. Not even made by the same people, but the float is identical. So I took the float out of that, and it's tipped back like that because it's still full of gas. But I took the float out and I put it in this carb. I put the carburetor on, and I got it running, fired up. I set my idle mixture using the screw up here. And what I found was the auto relieving choke was a little wonky. It was set in the proper setting from the factory, but it was too loose, so I needed to tighten that up a little bit. So all I did, there's a little arm that you gotta, it's supposed to be in the second notch from the right. I just put it, the second notch from the left. I put it the first notch from the left, and it straightened right out. But I did find at wide open throttle it was over revving. It was revving up like 4,000 RPM. Spec on this engine is 3,750. And the way to adjust that is, because it's got a single cable that controls the choke and the throttle, the way to adjust your high speed is to loosen this bolt, and you move the entire throttle plate up or down. Down makes it go faster, up makes it go higher or slower. So I loosen them just to the point where I could tap this to make it move, and I had my tachometer holding on the spark plug wire, and I was just tapping this with a hammer, and I got it down to about 3690, and I'm comfortable with that, so we'll leave it at that. It revs nice and fast now, but it's not 4,000 RPM. I don't want the thing flying apart. So yeah, that's all good now. I've gone through everything else mostly. I wasn't sure what was going on with all the throttle, and I know somebody had monkeyed with it. So I set the governor back to the spec that it should be. At that point, what you do is you put your throttle lever wide open throttle, hold the governor arm towards the carburetor, loosen the bolt, and you turn the governor shaft. There's a little hole in there, so you can see that. Let's get the light on. There we go. There's a little hole in that governor shaft there. So I stuck a little 90-degree pick in there. So with the bolt loose and the governor held towards the carburetor, that's wide open throttle. I stuck my pick in there and I turned that throttle shaft counterclockwise and then snug the bolt up. So that's setting the governor the way it should be at its base. So I did take a little bit of time. I just give her just a little bit of a wash. I got the hood polished up because it was pretty chalky and crappy. I'll show a before and after picture of that at the end of the video. I just did a little bit of polishing here and there. Nothing too crazy. I haven't gone onto the deck or anything yet. But I was monkeying with the battery. I got the battery out. I was just going to check and clean terminals, make sure that everything underneath here was in good shape, but found a bad terminal here, so that's not factory. And the cable's pretty short, so I can't really cut the end off and solder a new one on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that entire cable off, and I'll just build a new one. I got some nice heavy cable like that. I'll sweat two ends on and make that a nice new cable, and I'll put a little extra length on it too to give us some wiggle room. And I'll clean all the debris out of here and carry on with that. This is a little squeaky. This is the seat switches underneath here, and it looks like crap. So I'm going to take it off, I'm going to sand it, clean it, and repaint that. I've had the electrical apart under here, made sure all the terminals were nice and clean, so that works pretty good. And at this point, I'm going to start making a cable. And we'll get a little bit of footage of that. Don't need to watch me do all kinds of tedious little work, but we do have a repair to do on this hood. Down at the corner right in here, there's a little crack. I need to find some 1/4 inch wire mesh so I can put it on the back side of the hood, and I'll JB weld it so it's not pieces flying off of it. Like, it's a small 2-inch crack, so I just want to get that lined up and ready to go. I have changed oil. Oil filter was relatively new. There wasn't really any gas to speak of in there, so that's all good. Okay, we'll get set up, get a cable made, and we'll get some footage of that. Okay, so I dug through my stash, and this appears to be 6 gauge. I got lots of 4 gauge, I got a bunch of 8 gauge, and I managed to find a small piece of 6 gauge. Nice thing is it's already got a factory crimped end with a 1/4 inch hole in it, so that'll go right on the battery, which is nice. But on the other side, it is a bigger eyelet, so it's about a 3/8 or so. So I uncrimped it from the old cable, and I cleaned it up with a little bit of a Scotch-Brite wheel on a roll-lock pad. So now we're just gonna solder this end on. I like it. It was just crimped, but I like soldered ends. They're less problematic down the road. So we're gonna take just a little bit of insulation off the end of this. I think I'm gonna tin this first. I'll solder that first, so when I lay it in there and smash it flat with a hammer, it's not gonna go all wonky on me. Let's see if I can do that and still get you guys a visual. I'm using rosin core solders, but you should be using for electrical wires. It's not plumbing. You don't need 50-50. So we're just going to warm it up a little bit with a torch. Well, this is a rather large torch for doing this. It's a little hot. So I'm just going to heat up the copper. Drop some solder on there. As the copper heats up, that solder will just wick itself in there. I'm trying to make the end of the cable nice and solid so it doesn't fray when I put it all together. Let's have a look at that. Not too bad. A little bit of copper showing left. There we go. Nice and tinned. Where are you? There you are. Now you can focus. Anyways, the end of that wire's tinned. Well, zoomed in, that's why I can't. Whoa. That'd be better. There we go. So the end of that wire is now full of solder. Now I can get it in there. Get things crimped together. Where are you looking? You're supposed to be watching. So, get these ends pulled in a little bit. Pull it a little closer together. I'm going to solder this all together anyways. But What pliers as an anvil? Maybe. It's nice and tight. Yep, that's good. So these clamps clamp on the wire. These clamps clamp on the insulation. Get those pulled together. They don't have to be crazy tight. Snug is fine. They're just there to hang on to the insulation. That's good. I'm going to heat this again with a torch and solder the connection so it's nice and solid. Hopefully the camera stays focused on that piece. So I'm going to heat here and let the solder wick in, and it'll solder the eyelet to the wire. This connection is down under the tractor, so it's going to get exposed to more dust and dirt. I don't know if you saw that. I don't know, I'm not sure if the camera picked it up, but solder wicked right into the eyelet. Whew, that stinks. It wicked right under the eyelet. It liquefied the solder on the tinned end of the wire that I put there. It's still a little hot, so we'll let that cool. Now the eyelet will be part of the wire.